We are going to go for another break now, but coming up next, a look at the key events that shaped East Asia this year. And I will be speaking to an expert on what to expect in 2026. From a global tariff war to bilateral spats, East Asia saw significant power shifts and events in 2025. And tonight, we look at the key moments. One, U.S. President Donald Trump took office in January and announced China tariffs almost right off the bat. Even allies Japan and South Korea were not spared. Now Beijing fired back, setting off an escalating tit for tat. And tariffs on both sides went up more than 100% before an extended truce and rounds of U.S.-China trade talks in different capitals around the world. Now that truce is still in place. Well, East Asia also marked 80 years after the end of World War II, and China showed off massive firepower at its biggest ever military parade in September. President Xi Jinping stood with Russia's Vladimir Putin and North Korea's Kim Jong-un at the event in a show of unity against the West and, of course, demonstration of China's geopolitical clout. Well, elsewhere in the neighborhood, change at the very top after political crises. South Korea has a new president, Lee Jae-myung, who's vowed to make peace with the North. Now, his ousted predecessor, Yoon Suk-yeol, under arrest and facing trial for his short-lived martial law. And over in Japan, a new Iron Lady, Sanae Takaichi, took the reins after Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba stepped down to answer for the ruling Liberal Democratic Party's worst poll showing in years. Now, weeks after she's sworn in, Ms. Takaichi triggered Japan's biggest diplomatic uproar with China in years. She hinted that Tokyo could take military action if China attacked Taiwan. All this while her government continues to push for record defense spending. Now, for more insights, we are joined by Stephen Nagy, Professor of Politics and International Studies from the International Christian University. Well, thanks, Prof, for joining us this evening. So, picking up from what I just said, that we have seen all these flashpoints from Ms. Takaichi's Taiwan comments to East China Sea incidents, etc. Professor, where then, or what do you see as the main driver in China-Japan tensions in 2026 and why?
So 2026 will be driven by the same factors that I think have been driving the increased tensions in 2025. Insecurity at home for Beijing as the economy is slowing. Structural issues continue to pile on each other. And I think that there's growing, unrest and uncertainty in China with the direction of the country and the economic challenges it faces. And that puts tremendous pressure on the ruling government, and in particular Xi Jinping, who is the man at the top, to do something that, will push China forward. And I think they've very much taken advantage and manipulated Prime Minister Takaichi's comments about a Taiwan contingency requiring some kind of a security approach by Japan. And I think that is, that is certainly driving part of the tensions. But also they see Takaichi as a strong prime minister, a prime minister that could push back and strengthen relations with the U.S., and exert leadership in the broader region. And I think from China's perspective, this is not good. And this is why they've engaged in a massive disinformation campaign and economic coercion to try and really unseat Takaichi and really install some kind of revolving door of prime ministers that is weak domestically, weak on the international front. That hurts the U.S.-Japan alliance, and that's good for China.
Now, zooming out, of course, the biggest strategic relationship in the region is still U.S.-China. So looking ahead, which fault line do you think is most likely to define U.S.-China tension relations?
Well, what we're looking at in terms of bilateral relations between the U.S. and China is the hope that there'll be some kind of trade deal in the coming months. President Trump has agreed to visit Beijing in a warmer season, maybe April, May. We'll see how that goes. And then Xi Jinping, the Secretary General of the Communist Party, has agreed to reciprocate the visit to the United States. So I think what we can read from these potential agreements, that's not normal for the Chinese to agree so far ahead of a meeting, to come to a meeting, is that they're both putting on a truce, a short-term truce, until they can collect themselves and move to the next level of friction. And what I mean by that is I think that whatever happens in terms of a trade truce, they're going to go back to competing, because they're competing about technology, in particular AI and quantum computing. They want to be the dominant party in developing those technologies so that they can create the next 21st century economy. But not only the economy, but culture, medicines, that's that important stuff that goes in the military. Whoever wins this technological race over the long term really will significantly shift, I think, how our economies work, the international order, and it will probably strengthen each of their systems or one of the systems, depending on who is the dominant player in that race.
Now to the region's biggest potential flashpoint, which is Taiwan. How do you see cross-strait tensions evolving in the new year? And what sort of indicators would tell you that Beijing is recalibrating its approach towards Taiwan?
Well, we should always remember that the top officials in China, the top leaders, have reiterated year by year that they support peaceful reunification with Taiwan, but they don't eschew the use of force. That continues to be the case. But what we've seen is China, through its buildup of the PLA and acquiring the resources and the skills and the equipment to get to really be able to have a forced reunification if it's necessary. And they're going to continue to build those capacities because they want to compel Taiwan to come back to how they understand the motherland is as soon as possible. Now, on the Taiwan side, and they continue to say the same thing, that they want peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. They would like the status quo to continue to emerge. And, officials and leaders are very, 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 very sensitive to not sending any other signal, for example, pursuit of independence or a declaration of independence. So the Taiwanese are going to be tremendously nuanced in the coming year. And the Chinese are going to continue to say that we want reunification as soon as possible. The challenge is that reunifying with China today in its current political context is not so attractive for the Taiwanese, and I think from the Taiwanese perspective, they are still wanting to maintain their political system, their civil society, their freedom of press, and their rule of law system. So we have a huge amount of incompatibility between the two sides, but I think on both sides of the straits, they don't want war. They want peace, and they want to maintain the status quo, but ensure that Taiwan doesn't slip away in terms of its identity or in some kind of independence.
Well, we've also got the bigger strategic backdrop in terms of an arms buildup across the region. We've seen defense postures expanding, and also that new START, which is expiring in February 2026, meaning there's going to be less transparency between the US and Russia. But how do you think all of that possibly could alter the stability in East Asia?
So I think we should always remember that the biggest spender in terms of defense spending is China. It's about $250 to $260 billion a year in the region. I'm excluding the United States, but half of that is for domestic security. So China is worried more about domestic security issues than outside security issues. And then we have Southeast Asian countries, whether it's the Philippines, Vietnam, and others. They're investing in defense spending. But where I think the biggest area of concern is those gray zone and hybrid tactics that are primarily used by the Chinese. But we also see, some of the states in Southeast Asia also making claims and building islands and doing these controversial things that are creating instability within the region. So, in the coming year, what I worry about is some kind of accidental escalation that's associated with gray zone and hybrid tactics. Then countries are investing in these areas, whether they're merchant ships or otherwise, because they're better ways to achieve your security interests without escalating to a military conflict. And this is the area that I think we should watch. This is where the capabilities are going to be spent. And it's not going to just be in the South China Sea. It's going to be across the Taiwan Strait and the East China Sea as well.
Lots of risks and signals to watch in the coming year. Thanks so very much for your insights, Professor Stephen Nagy from the International Christian University.